In this session, we will be discussing about the second chapter, that is species and speciation. Species is a very common term which we use in biology. So in biology, species is one of the basic units of biological classification and taxonomic rank. A species is often defined as a group of organisms capable of interbreeding and producing fertile offspring. Organisms that are capable of interbreeding to produce fertile offspring is called as species. They should be able to produce a fertile offspring. A species, according to the definition, is largest gene pool that exists under natural conditions. Thus, if a pair of organisms are capable of producing offspring in nature, they must be of the same. They must belong to the same species. So, if a species is defined as a group of potentially interbreeding populations, then it is necessary that it has to determine what prevents the certain groups for organisms from interbreeding. That means if species, if they interbreed and produce a fertile offspring, then only we call them as a species. So if some sort of barrier comes in between that prevents certain groups from interbreeding, that can be called as a reproductive isolation. So is it different to anatomy, behavior? It might be a different anatomy, behavior, time available for mating, or some other barrier that separates populations into species. Ultimately, some form of reproductive isolation is involved. For reproductive isolation can be categorized according to whether the barrier blocks fertilization or prevent complete development after a hybrid zygote has been formed. So, keeping in account that, we can categorize reproductive isolation into two types. That's one is pre-zygotic isolation and post-zygotic isolation. In pre-zygotic isolation is that is the characteristics that prevent individuals of two species from mating with one another or prevent fertilization is called as pre-zygotic isolation. So this might include different mate attracting behaviors, breeding times. The breeding times might be different of both species. So habitat preferences, sperm recognition proteins, mechanical barriers to mating, all this plays an important role in can be considered as a part or a factor that affects the species of interbreeding. The second is the post-zygotic isolation. In the case of post-zygotic reproductive isolation, individuals from two species are capable of producing a zygote, but these offsprings are incapable of normal growth or reproduction. That means they can produce an offspring, but the hybrid which is formed, or offspring which is formed, is unable to reproduce. Many post-zygotic barriers to hybridization include reduced hybrid viability, reduced hybrid fertility, hybrid breakdown. That is, in reduced hybrid viability, hybrids lack vigor and rarely, if ever, reach sexual maturity. So these offsprings are considered non-viable because ultimately they are unable to reproduce. In reduced hybrid fertility, interbreeding between species occur and hybrids are formed. However, the hybrids themselves are usually sterile. So either of the case, both of the cases, ultimately the hybrid is unable to fertilize or unable to produce another, they cannot produce the next generation basically. So in hybrid breakdowns, hybrids are capable of reproducing, but their offsprings have either reduced fertility or reduced viability. Next important topic which is important in species is adaptive radiation. So in evolutionary biology, adaptive radiation is the evolution of ecological and phenotypic diversity within a rapidly multiplying lineage. Adaptive radiation often occurs as a result of an organism arising in an environment with unoccupied niches, such as newly formed lake or isolated island chain. So in such cases, an adaptive radiation occurs in environment with unoccupied niches. So the colonizing population may diversify rapidly to take advantage of all possible niches. Four features can be used to identify an adaptive radiation, like four features, four common features. A common ancestry of component species, specifically a recent ancestry. You have to make note that this is not the same as the monophyly in which all descendants of a common ancestor are included. The second one is a phenotype environment correlation. That is a significant association between the environment and the morphological and physiological traits used to exploit those environments. Trait utility, that is the performance or fitness advantages of trait values in their corresponding environments. Rapid speciation, presence of one or more bursts in the emergence of new species around the time the ecological and phenotypic divergence is underway. So there is a strong example we can quote when we name the term adaptive radiation. One of the classic example is that of Darwin's finches. So when Charles Darwin, when he was in the Galapagos Islands, he was doing his research for the or from where he got his theory of evolution, and he coined the term for natural selection, survival of the fittest. All these terms came when he was when he was doing his research in the Galapagos Islands. So when Charles Darwin was in the Galapagos Islands, one of the first things he noticed is the variety of finches that existed on each of the islands. So there were many different species of finches which differed in their beak shape and overall size. So this can be called a type of adaptive radiation. So this is where species, all deriving from a common ancestor, have over time successfully adapted to their environment via natural selection. Previously, the finches occupied the South American mainland actually, but somehow they managed to occupy the Galapagos Islands over 600 miles away. So that was really the duration was, the distance was only 600 miles away. So they occupied an ecological niche with little competition. As the population began to flourish in these advantageous conditions, intra-specific competition became a factor. That is, between the species, the competition was more, and the resources on the islands were squeezed, and they could not sustain the population of finches. So due to these mechanism, they have to adopt a natural, by the means of natural selections or changes in the gene pool, the finches became more adapted to the environment. So because they became more adapted to the environment, and the competition grew, the finches managed to find new ecological niches that would present less competition and allow them and their genome allow their genome to continue. That is because they got adapted to the environment, and their beaks were they have evolved new beaks which would help them to consume the food on that particular island, and because of that they have overcome the survival of the fittest, and new new beaks, new type of beaks have been adopted with the environment, and because of this they were facing less competition, and their the survival rate was more. So this is one strong example. Darwin's finches is called as one of the strongest example of adaptive radiation. So speciation next. What is called as speciation? So species is called as basic unit of biology, or the basic unit of the biological taxa. But speciation refers to the evolutionary process by which new biological species arise. Due to genetic isolation, the differences in gene pools among species become so great that they cannot reproduce through interbreeding. So as a result, new species are formed with a genome that is genetically distinct from the main population. So that is the term came of speciation. That is something different from the usual, the main population is called as the speciation. So there are mainly four types of speciation that can occur based on the reproductive or geographic isolation and other environmental factors. Allopatric speciation, peripatric speciation, parapatric speciation, and sympatric speciation. So allopatric speciation, let us discuss the allopatric speciation first. So during allopatric speciation, population splits into two geographically isolated populations, into two different. That may be due to by the, for example, by habitat fragmentation, due to geographical changes such as mountain building. The isolated populations then undergo genotypic or phenotypic divergence as they become subject to dissimilar selective pressures. They independently undergo genetic drift, different mutations arise in these two populations. And when the populations come back into contact, they have evolved such that they are reproductively isolated and are no longer capable of exchanging genes. Even after all these pressures, some barrier a mountain building, because of a geographic isolation or a geographic change like mountain building, they got separated. Even after they have after this barrier has been removed and they are brought together, still they are unable to interbreed because they are no longer capable of exchanging genes. So this type of speciation can be called as allopatric speciation. Next is the peripatric speciation. So in peripatric speciation, a subform, it can be actually called a subform of allopatric speciation. So genetic drift is often proposed to play a main or a major role in peripatric speciation. A genetic drift or allelic drift, you can say, is a change in the frequency of a gene variant or gene allele in a population due to random sampling. So the alleles in the offspring are a sample of those in the parents, and chance has a role in determining whether a given individual survives and reproduces. So all of mean it's the survival rate is less or not. It depends entirely on the chance. So a population's allopatric frequency is the fraction of the copies of one gene that share a particular form. So genetic drift may cause gene variants to disappear completely and thereby reduce genetic variation. Parapatric speciation. In parapatric speciation, there is only partial separation of the zones of two diverging populations afforded by the geography. That is only, we can say, it's only partial, it's not completely a barrier is placed there. There is only a partial zone partition between the two species. So individuals of each species may come in contact or cross habitats from time to time, but reduced fitness of the heterozygote leads to selection of behaviors or mechanisms that prevent their interbreeding. Parapatric speciation is modeled on continuous variation within a single connected habitat acting as a source of natural selection rather than effects of isolation of habitats produced in peripatric and allopatric speciation. So ecologist refers to parapatric and peripatric in terms of ecological niches. So a niche must be available for these species, for the parapatric speciation to present. A successful niche should be present in order for a new species to be successful. Sympatric speciation. So it refers to the formation of two or more descendant species from a single ancestral species, all occupying the same geographic location. In in sympatric speciation, species diverge while inhabiting the same place. So what we discussed all these four types of species: allopatric, parapatric, peripatric, sympatric. All speciation is occurred. Actually, what why speciation occurs, or what can be the cause of the speciation? So in speciation, we can see there are mainly two causes or two factors that mainly contribute to the cause of speciation. One is the geographic isolation, and another is the reduction of gene flow. Geographic isolation. Scientists think that geographic isolation is a common way for the process of speciation to begin. That means it might be a river change course, the course of the river might have changed, or a mountain rise, continents drift, organisms migrate, and what what was once a continuous population is divided into two or more smaller populations. So one such example of geographic can be called one example that I can quote is about the fruit fly. So some fruit fly larvae were washed up on an island, and speciation started because populations were prevented from interbreeding by geographic isolation. So one such that was because they washed up the island, and speciation arises because of the geographic isolation. So it doesn't even need to be a physical barrier like a river that separates two or more groups of organisms. It might just be unfavorable habitat also between the two populations that keeps them from mating from one another. The next is the reduction of gene flow. Speciation might also happen in a population with no specific extrinsic barrier to gene flow. It might also happen. So, imagine a situation in which a population extends over a broad geographic range and mating throughout the population is not random. So, in such cases, individuals like in the far west would have zero chance of mating with the individuals in the far eastern part. So, that also can play a major role in the cause of speciation. So, both species, one is in the far west, one is the far east. So, we have reduced gene flow, but but it's not a total isolation. So this may or may not be sufficient to cause speciation. So speciation would probably also require different selective pressures at opposite ends of the range which would alter the gene frequencies in groups at different ends of the range, so much that they would not be able to mate even if they are united, if they were united. So these two main factors plays a major role to cause the speciation.